foreign predatory parasitic corporations are replacing our natural environment with an industrial landscape of wind turbines. One Nation will stand against sending children down a path of drug dependency and body mutilation to appease the gender cult. Leave our kids alone. The Trusted Digital Identity Bill is a global surveillance and control mechanism that profit-hungry corporations and power-mad politicians drafted and crafted. One Nation opposes this inhuman, dystopian future that the United Nations promotes as the Great Reset, and we condemn this Parliament for signing on to it. I called for Australia to reject the World Economic Forum's Great Reset and instead mount a Great Resist. Just like the koalas being euthanised to make way for wind turbines or damaged solar panels leaking toxic heavy metals into waterways, the United Nations net zero plan again involves killing the environment to save it. I've been speaking about the fear, the oppression and the inhuman cruelty of our COVID response since July 2020. I promised to hound down those responsible, and I will continue relentlessly to keep that promise. You're about to be live with me, Senator Malcolm Roberts. And you're about to be live with the very special guest who I'll introduce in a minute. So after the special guest, well, he'll be here for the whole show, the whole live stream. And I have to finish at 4 o'clock because I have to go on TNT radio at 4 o'clock. What I want to do also is we'll raise various issues, but we'll go through them pretty quickly for two reasons. I want to focus this guest of ours, you'll know him, on a very positive circumstance. And I also want to open up to question and answer because this man, if he disagrees with me, he'll disagree with me. So that's what we need. We need good debate. So my special guest is Craig Kelly, formerly from the Liberal Party, United Australia Party, and now with One Nation.
Fantastic
G'day, Craig.
To be with you, Malcolm. Yeah, great to be with you and great to be on these lives that you do every Friday afternoon. And also it's great to be on the One Nation team. You and I were in Parliament together for many years, and you're always someone that I had great respect for. I agree. We're on the same page almost, I think, 99% of the issues. And if ever I was, unsure about something, you're always a friend that I could bounce ideas off and know that I could talk in confidence and trust. That, unfortunately, something I couldn't do amongst my old former Liberal colleagues.
Well, let's talk about that in a minute, but let's get on to something very important for the immediate future of our country and the long-term future of our country, the digital ID. Last 2 weeks ago on Wednesday evening, when the Senate rose after the guillotine debate, and no debate at all, not a single word of debate, not even on amendments that were floated to legislation, just passed on a vote, I was devastated. It's not my responsibility, but I still felt because it was the forces are against us. But on Thursday, I walked into the office, mate, and everyone in the office is happy. And I'm saying, what's going on? And they said, Malcolm, you don't realise that the House of Representatives was held back late last night so that it would receive the bill from the Senate and then deal with it and pass it and whip it through Parliament. Well, they didn't get it. So that was wonderful. And social media ripped the hell out of Labor. So can you tell us what we're going to be doing about this?
Catch the couple things. Remember, this was originally Liberal Party policy. The Liberal Party put out a draft exposure bill back in October 2021. So this has been long-standing Liberal policy. The Liberal Party took this at the last election, was effectively the same as Albanese's digital ID bill. Now, the minute that it came out, I found some old social media posts where I criticised and said how terrible this was. It is the start of, with the central bank digital currencies, to give big government more control over our lives. It is the exact opposite direction that we should be heading.
Yes, and I want to keep going, mate. Keep going.
Yeah, a very important point that you made there, that the bill was introduced in the Senate. Now, anyone that follows parliamentary procedure should smell a rat immediately. The normal procedure in the federal parliament, especially for government bills, is that the legislation is introduced in the lower house, the House of Representatives, where it is debated and then it is voted upon, and then it goes to our Senate, otherwise known as the House of Review. The government typically does not start bills in the Senate, let alone then to guillotine and cut them off with no debate. I don't know what the rest of those senators there are doing down there. That is their job, to scrutinise legislation and to debate it. To have such an important bill as this digital identity bill, with so many potential unintended consequences, to have it without any debate at all and introduced in the Senate, You just have to smell one giant rat. There are many, many reasons why this needs to be opposed. So that's why we've got these national rallies around the country being planned. We've still got the petition going. Because if we can raise enough protest about this, it is not law yet, it has to go back to the House of Reps. We know Albanese is a weak leader that follows the crowd. And if he can see that there's enough public protest and angst about this, he will pull the bill and it will not proceed through the House of Reps.
Yes, and let me remind everyone, I know Craig will remember this, that when the cash ban bill was introduced by the Liberal Party into Parliament under Morrison, we opposed it, and it went through the House of Representatives with Labor Party support. We got stuck into the Labor Party. Before it came to the Senate, we marshalled the crossbench, we got the Greens, and when it came into the Senate, it was so hostile that it was sent to a committee, and then our office, my office, worked with grassroots party members of the Liberal Party and Labor Party. They put so much pressure on their Liberal and Labor Party MPs that it was stayed in the Senate committee, and the bill stayed in the Senate committee, and then I moved a motion a few months later saying get rid of it out of the Senate, and they got rid of it out of the Senate, Craig. That's what the grassroots people can do. The way to stop this bill, first of all, when we saw how much, I want to thank everyone, because on Wednesday I was pretty shot. But Thursday morning, we realised that the people had put in so much pressure on the Liberal Party and the Labor Party through social media, through telephone calls, and especially those telephone calls, that the Labor Party looks like it's running scared. So keep the pressure up. We started a petition. Within 2 days, got 60,000 signatures in 2 days, Craig.
Yeah, incredible.
And then the other thing we're going to be doing is having those national protest days. Can you explain what that is, please, Craig?
Yeah, look, the idea is, again, just to keep the pressure up on the government. We're in a very lengthy break at the moment. I think Parliament goes back, I think it's the 5th of May. Malcolm, you might be able to correct me there. It's Tuesday.
I think it's the 7th. 7th, yeah.
Tuesday the 7th of May. Parliament goes back then. So there's enough time. If we can if Albanese can see there's enough public objection to this, with people protesting in the streets, we can stop this digital identity bill from being passed. Right? So that's why we need everyone to turn out. We've got these rallies planned. It's over that long weekend, the first long weekend in May. We're just coordinating them now, the locations. It'll be on I think we've picked the Sunday to do it, the Sunday around about
Sunday
midday.
the 5th.
Please. Sorry? Sunday the 5th.
Sunday the 5th.
Sunday the 5th is the day we've got set aside. So that's in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and we're organising in the other states as well. This is the one chance we've got to stop this legislation. If we can get a good turnout on that day, and Albanese can see the number of people that are protesting against this and will vote against the Labor Party, and they should also vote against the Liberal Party because it was their idea, we can stop this legislation from going through. Otherwise,
what I want to do is thank everyone again for putting so much pressure on the Labor Party, the Greens, Pocock, and the Liberals. That's the first thing. I want to invite you to get involved in keeping that pressure up on social media, especially on the Labor Party's page and the Greens page and David Pocock's page. David Pocock is vulnerable. He's another weak one, just like Albanese. So keep the pressure up on these people. Tell them just exactly what you think about it. Come sign the petition, One Nation petition. Go to the One Nation website and sign the petition, please. And attend the rallies on Sunday, May the 5th. I want to apologise for two errors in Pauline Hanson's cartoon. They said the next day, or soon after the bill went through the Senate, that it had passed through Parliament. That was incorrect, of course. That was not the case. It hasn't gone through the lower house, so that's not correct. What was the other error, Craig? That's right. When they asked the question in the cartoon, what can we do about it? There's nothing you can do about it. Well, One Nation is standing up, organising these protests so you can do something about it. You can help us do something about it. One Nation has been very strong in opposition. When we heard about this paper being introduced back in 2021, I came out really firing up about that, and we really blasted. We made a series of 7 videos. Some of them have gone around the world. Craig internally at that time in the Liberal Party, I didn't know it then, but he stood up strongly on the party floor in the party meeting and called them out on it. So One Nation has a history of being totally against this digital identity bill.
Look, what is surprising now is some of the Liberal members are sniffing the wind, and they're coming out very strongly that they're against it. Where were these guys back in 2021 when the Liberal Party put out that exposure draft of it, they were saying, where were they at the last election when we were batting away and we were trying to raise it as an issue and being sort of dismissed as this is not important, everyone's for it sort of thing. Where were they? The Liberal Party took this as a policy to the last election. So they, to now stand up now as some of the members are doing, look, we welcome their support and we're glad that they've seen the light. But realistically, it shows how weak the Liberal Party are, that they introduced this to start with, and they were very happy to see it go through. Like their support, their opposition in the Senate was only just a bluff. They knew Labor had the numbers to get it through.
Yep. So someone just said here, I missed who it was, looking at some of the messages going past, Craig, you politicians haven't got any power. In reality, you're right. We haven't got the numbers in the Senate. We haven't got the numbers in the House of Representatives to defeat this. But I'm telling you that by marshalling the people, we can smash this and get rid of it.
Yes.
So that's where the power comes. The power comes from us, not directly. The power comes from us with the people behind us. So it's the people power. That's what we want to invoke. So because, our country is lost. So we need to restore our country and our planet for humans to abound and thrive. And I want to get onto that in a minute. Until then, just some quick snippets on other issues, Craig. Albanese has announced command and control future made in Australia. Going to subsidise. You still with us?
Joseph
going to
Stalin,
subsidise solar panels in this country.
Wasn't that one of Stalin's plans? We have government control the levers of the economy. Work out. Look, when the government has no money itself. So when the government decides we should invest in certain things, all it is doing is taking money away from the private sector and redirecting that investment into other areas of the economy. And government has a terrible, terrible record of picking winners. You go throughout history when governments tried to pick winners in industry, they have failed 99.9% of the time. And to think someone like Albanese and Bowen, that have no experience outside of politics, that have zero commercial experience, that have never ever worked in manufacturing, had to produce anything, are now these two economic geniuses that should work out better than the private sector where investment should go. It'll just lead to lower output, a lower wealth in this country, and more poverty. It is a disastrous plan. And you only just look at that. Look at his first investment. $1 billion building a factory to manufacture solar panels in Australia. Now, if you look at the global details of that market at the moment, there is massive, absolutely massive overcapacity in manufacturing for solar panels. It's something like more than double the capacity than what is needed. And you wouldn't build a solar factory anywhere in the world today because of that overcapacity. And the last place you would build it would be in Australia, where you were trying to compete against China, who has the advantage of low-cost electricity, about a third of the cost of Australia to manufacture those solar panels with, and they have slave labour. So to put money in that to build a solar panel factory in Australia, it's just madness. No one would do it unless you were playing with other people's money and you didn't really care what the return was and you were doing it for a short-term sort of publicity stunt. And that's exactly what Albanese and Bowen are doing. And now, having done that and seen the publicity they get, they're going to do that through the other sectors of the economy. This is a very dark period of history economically if this goes ahead.
Right, and Jim Chalmers, this is a quote from the Australian newspaper. Jim Chalmers, the Treasurer, handpicked the chair of the Productivity Commission.
That's right.
And that Productivity Commission chair has warned Labor's future Made in Australia plan would divert investment from more productive parts of the economy and lead to higher than necessary costs for taxpayers. Higher than necessary costs.
Right.
We all know, Craig, that when you put subsidies in place, it raises prices because the threshold of affordability has been increased with the subsidies. The second thing is, by doing this, we are decreasing the productivity of our country, which means we decrease the wealth of our country. And so it's absolutely insane. And the reason electricity prices are so advantageous in China is they haven't got all the UN and World Economic Forum bullshit that we're paying for. So we're shipping our coal to China. They're producing about 8 times the coal we have as it is, and they want more from us so that they can have cheap electricity while we're subsidizing the Chinese to invest and install panels in this country and wind turbines in this country. They're not going to make wind turbines, are they? Just solar panels.
Look, who knows what Albanese's got, what other mad plan he's got. Government should not be doing this. Government should not be picking out winners. They should be getting out. They should be lowering the costs, lowering the red tape, and letting the private sector decide what is the best way to invest. because
Well
the
said.
private
Let's get on to the next. Sorry.
when the money is wasted.
There's an article yesterday. Did you see it in the Australian Journal of General Practitioners?
Yes, absolutely, yeah.
That'd be news. That'd be welcome news for you, because let's set the scene before you make a comment, Craig. The Royal Australian College of General Practitioners was one of the mongrel outfits that pushed the COVID injections and told doctors to shut up, and that's what they've done. Now they're coming out. Well, I'll let Craig have the glory
That's
of
right.
saying
Now
they're
there's a
coming out.
problem. That's right. Maybe they're not safe and effective like we were told. Look, Malcolm, we had our institutions failed us appallingly during the COVID period of time. And the biggest failure was the attacks and the suppression of free speech. We had many doctors in this country that were trying to sound the alarm bells, that had an alternate opinion to what the press releases that were being rolled out by Big Pharma. But they were silenced. They were silenced by government bureaucracies. We had, one of the great things about a free country is the sanctity of the doctor-patient relationship, where you close that door in the doctor's surgery and you have a private discussion with your doctor. You rely upon his expertise and his education and his practical experience about what is best for your health. We had it in this country where that sanctity was broken, that relationship was broken, and instead what we had was basically big government telling doctors what to do.
Well, what happens here is the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners basically endorsed the injections and forced them on people by doing so, forcing them through the mandate. Now we've got the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners sending this Journal of General Practice article that was put out by a very senior person in the Australian Journal of General Practice, putting out a paper and sent to all the GPs saying, well, this long COVID, it may be long vax.
Yes.
And putting out significant problems that they say are caused by the injections. So here we have the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners raising serious questions about the injections, going further than raising serious questions, saying they cause certain medical conditions, serious medical conditions.
Well, it's a bit late now for these guys. You can't uninject the stuff from your body. Now, these people should have known. There should have been greater debate when the injections were talked about previously. And if you actually looked at the data from Pfizer's original trials, it showed a greater degree of deaths from all causes in the vaccinating group than it did in the placebo group. These things should have never, ever been approved. They should have never gotten to market. And yet you've now got thousands and thousands of doctors around the world screaming the house down, putting the evidence up, saying, pull these things off the market. And yet here we have, it's still these groups, they're slowly coming around, slowly admitting, drip, there's a problem, they got it wrong. It is, as I said, this is one of the darkest periods of our history. We've got to really think hard about a Bill of Rights in this country to ensure this can never happen again. Because we're through a period of mass. Yeah, go. It was a period of mass hysteria that the country went through. And when you go through these periods of mass hysteria, that's where you need those human rights provisions and the provisions in your constitution to protect those freedoms. Now, those freedoms and human rights regulations, they're not there for the good times. They have to be there when you've got this mass hysteria to keep you on track. And this country showed, and I was someone that sort of was always never convinced of the need for a Bill of Rights in our Constitution, but I've changed my mind because of what COVID is. We need in our Constitution an update to it, an amendment to it that puts in provisions for protect of free speech, to protect human rights, and to give the citizen, the average citizen, the right to say no when big government decides you should inject a substance into your body. That must always be your free choice, right? In a free society, it must be a free choice for the citizen to make, especially when it's an experimental medical intervention with experimental substance that has zero long-term safety data, and for which there were no carcinogenic tests even done on this vaccine.
Just on that, Craig, let's raise the Bill of Rights for another discussion between you and me, and maybe we'll get a couple of lawyers in as guests. But I disagree with you on the Bill of Rights for different reasons, but we need to make sure these freedoms are protected. So I agree with you on that, but not the Bill of Rights. I don't think that's the way to go. But let's have a debate about that. It's because within One Nation, we like to disagree with each other. That rounds off the debate. And I know you did that during the Liberal Party. You alone were sometimes speaking out. That's why you left the Liberal Party, because of this very issue. Are you aware that the Surgeon General for Florida, Mr. Ladapo,
Joe Lombardo, yeah, wonderful man.
Yeah, yes, and what he's doing now is he's having an inquiry into all-cause mortality to see the cause of why so many people are dying.
I'll tell you what,
wonderful.
I know we want a policy of net zero migration, but I'll tell you one bloke we should try and import into the country, and that is the Surgeon General of Florida, Dr. Joe Lombardo. He has done a wonderful job during COVID, and a wonderful human being. If we could somehow poach him, to be the Chief Medical Officer of Australia, we'd be in a far, far better place. But you're right. He's someone that's actually looking at the data, looking at the details, and actually calling it out.
And they're trying to come up with the cause, define the causes of the increased mortality following the COVID injections. And what about Jayanti? I've forgotten the doctor's second name. She's from Sri Lanka. She's a wonderful doctor. She's been very strong against this COVID mismanagement and deceit. You know the one from Sri Lanka? Have you met her? Jayanti?
No, I haven't.
Her name's Jayanti. Okay, she's wonderful. She's doing a lot of work with AMPS. She apparently, I only got notification of this late last night. She apparently has been doing research into Pfizer's trial data. And Pfizer has hidden many, many deaths.
That's right.
So even they didn't complete their tests. They shut them down early for that reason. But now she's got solid proof. So we're looking for information on that too. So that'll come out soon. Let's move on to something that is a consequence of the mismanagement and the deceit around COVID, Craig, and that's the housing crisis. Because of the lockdowns, we had a supply shortfall. So we had less houses coming onto the market. Because of the lockdowns in many parts of the world, we've had a shortage of building materials, so we've seen building costs go up. We've also seen a huge increase in immigration, which has driven demand through the roof. So and we also had inflation because of the mismanagement of the RBA, the Reserve Bank of Australia, and Prime Minister Morrison and the premiers. We saw huge inflation, which has driven up housing prices. Plus, we've got net zero. The perfect storm. Net zero driving up electricity prices. So we've got the perfect storm. We've got a housing crisis with prices going through the roof. We've got rentals going through the roof. We've got normally around about 3% rental vacancy. We've now got 0.7%, which is basically nothing there. We've got people living, sleeping, working people actually going home to their car, to their tent, to their caravan, sleeping under bridges. This is what's happening in one of the wealthiest countries when it comes to resources in the world. And this has all been manufactured by the Liberal Labor Uniparty. Do you want to make any comments about housing?
Look, firstly, just look at the migration rates post-COVID. We are up to over a net intake. That's when you look at the people coming into the country versus the people migrating out of the country, of over 500,000 in the last financial year. Now, between the end of the Second World War and the Sydney Olympics, we had an average of around about 80,000 net migration. The Howard government pushed that up over to 200,000, and Albanese has now taken up over 500,000. Now, you can't bring that number of people into your country unless you can actually construct the number of houses. That has given us a growth rate in this country of 2.5% population growth. You have to look to sort of these backward third world African countries to find anywhere in the world that has a 2.5% population growth. You simply, it's population growth on steroids. And when you can't build the houses quick enough to house the population that are coming in, you create the old laws of supply and demand. And we have seen rents skyrocket. I think this has been from Albanese, it has been the greatest betrayal of working Australians. Many of those, good Labor people that have been in the Labor movement their entire life, and many of them would have gone out and handed out for Albanese at the last election and worked on his campaign, that rented property, have been betrayed by Albanese and are seeing, because of the policies of the Labor Party that they supported, that their rents have gone up 50% and more. And you've got crowding people terrified if The social, you have people really suffering because of these policies. And why is Albanese doing this? Right? Why is he running these great high rates of migration? Because it is the only way that he can show that the economy is measured by GDP growth. The total size of the economy is growing. And that's not the parameter we should be looking at. The measurement, whether we are in recession or not recession, or whether we're going forward or backwards, it should be GDP per capita. That is the average citizen's slice of the pie. It's no point growing the pie bigger if you've got to cut it up into smaller and smaller pieces. And that's what Albanese has done. So the last 3 quarters, we have had negative growth. We have gone backwards in GDP per capita. That means Australians are getting poorer under Albanese. And to mask that, he brings in record numbers of people to try, look at the jobs I've created, he says. And aren't I wonderful how the economy is getting bigger when every citizen's slice is actually getting smaller.
Right, and that's exactly what we've said in the past. For those who haven't heard it in the past, Albanese doesn't want to be the Prime Minister when the country is officially in recession. To be in recession, you must have 2 quarters, 2 3-month periods in a row of negative growth in the economy. What Craig's pointing out is something we've pointed out in the past. We have had negative growth per person GDP for several months now, many months now. What is it? You said 3 quarters. I thought it was actually more than that.
The last 3. It's actually probably the last 4 quarters. The last was basically 0 or just a slight minus. But we've had 3 or 4 quarters of negative growth in a row. That is a recession in any other terms, and has been masked because of the extra number of people. Like, if you want to grow the economy, why not annex Papua New Guinea and bring the Papua New Guinea economy into Australia? Oh yes, Australia's economy has gotten much bigger, but every Australian citizen's slice has got smaller, and that is what is happening under Albanese. It is the faulty measurement to talk about recessions as a gross domestic product plus overall size of the economy is not the way we should be doing it.
Right, as Megan Mogg said, immigration is a GDP band-aid. It's an illusion. It's more than a band-aid, Megan. It's an illusion because they're hiding the fact that we are in recession. They don't want to be officially declared in recession, but we are in recession. They're bringing in migrants to hide that. It's a scam. But more importantly, it's an inhuman scam, Craig, because there are people suffering. There are people near where I am in Brisbane right now, in the cities of Ipswich, Logan, Beaudesert. Well, Beaudesert's not a city, but it's a town. But cities and other cities, provincial cities in Queensland, in some of these places, council rangers are evicting people, forcing them to move on, and sometimes they're doing it by taking their kids because the kids are at home in the car. That's where they're at home, in the car, and when the parents are still at work. We've got good working families can't get a bloody house in Australia. That's ridiculous. When you think about the numbers, we've got and Albanese said we're raising numbers to get back to pre-COVID. That is a complete lie because we had 1.9 million people on working visas before COVID. We have now got 2.3 plus 400,000 tourists. That's 2.7 million people looking for extra people. That's at 10% of our Australian population looking for houses and a roof over their head. That's what they're doing. We've got 600,000 students in this country, and we've got 100,000 student accommodation beds. There's a shortage of beds. Albo, wake up and stop telling lies. So let's get on to something positive because we'll talk more about housing in the past, in the future. Craig, you're full bottle on this climate fraud. We've done a lot of work together. We've supported each other on this for many years. Bob Carter, I want to tell a story. Bob Carter said to me, Bob Carter is the famous paleoclimatologist, wonderful man, went around the country exposing the climate fraud. He said to me one day, as fellow warriors exposing this, he said, Malcolm, this climate fraud is the biggest problem we've ever seen. I said, biggest scam we've ever seen. And I said, Bob, it's not even close. And he said, what do you mean? I said, the money scam is the biggest one, the printing of money out of thin air, Federal Reserve Bank, privately owned, etc. He said, oh, yeah, you got a point there. But, Bob, I said, that's not the biggest scam. He said, what, there's a bigger scam? I said, yes, the anti-human scam. And you know what I'm getting at, Craig.
I do.
Always beneath these globalist policies is an unstated yet implicit assumption, very strong assumption, that our goal in life is to protect the environment because humans don't care about the environment. We need to protect the planet. That is an inhuman goal. and it's based on a lie. Civilization, that they're saying that civilization and human civilization and natural environment are mutually exclusive. That's a lie, Craig. All three of them are lies.
It's the brainwashing of children in school, where they are taught of sort of like the Bambi scenario of Mother Nature, that she's kind and Mother Nature looks after us. The reality is the natural environment is vicious, it is deadly, it is basically a beast eat beast. It has disease and pestilence and vicious climate disasters. And as humankind, we modify Mother Nature to protect ourselves from it, to protect ourselves from violent storms, to protect ourselves from extreme weather, to protect ourselves from droughts. That is what humans are about modifying Mother Nature to make it safer and more friendly for human beings to live and survive. And we've seen that if you look at the data shows how successful that we've been over the last few decades doing that, with the decline in deaths. But unfortunately, these kids have been brainwashed to think just because it's natural, it must be better, irrespective of the disease and pestilence that may come with it. And unless we can reverse this trend, Malcolm, we are in for approaching a very dark period of human history, where we've got people that think it's okay to sacrifice human lives for some mythical way of improving the environment.
Well, and that's where you and I know the reality is that the best way to protect the environment is to enhance human civilization. Because let's be frank about a couple of things. First of all, the lie that humans don't care. That's a complete lie. And the evidence for that is I can see you right in front of me. I've told this story before. When a foal is born from a mare, it drops out onto the ground, it shudders to its feet, and eventually it staggers to its feet, rather, in about 20 minutes, and it starts cantering. Well, when you were born, mate, it's the only time we were probably the same size as each other, we were both about this long. And you were completely helpless. I was completely helpless. And every human is completely helpless for several years. We're the only species that's the case. We take enormous time for our large brains to develop, and we're very vulnerable. We're completely helpless. So the only way you could possibly be on that camera of yours is if someone had cared for you somewhere along the way. Now, whether our parents did a perfect job or not, you can argue that. Some people are better parented than others. It doesn't matter. You might not have even had parents who stuck around. They might have left you. Someone cared for you, and humans care. And when you look at farmers, the way they farm the land, they care. So the first thing is humans do care. Not all humans, though, care. We've got people like Stalin, Hitler, Mao, Morrison, Palaszczuk, Andrews, Greg Hunt, people like that who don't give a damn. But they are in the minority. The majority of humans care. What the globalists say is we're going to wreck this environment because we don't understand it, that we're going to destroy it because we don't care, put us in charge. That's what they're saying. And then you say, hang on a minute, aren't you guys humans? So the globalists and control freaks, they want to offer themselves to govern. Now, Thomas Jefferson, who was probably the most intelligent of the founding fathers in America, he said that people are wonderful, but you've got to be careful of control freaks taking over your government. And that's exactly what's going on. So rather than have that assumption that the globalists are saying humans don't care, human civilization is the enemy of the environment, and we need to make our main thrust to protect the environment. I reckon, Craig, a far better goal for us is for humans to flourish. My main goal should be for humans to flourish. What do you reckon?
No, exactly. That's the priority. Some people equate a human life to that of a bug. And you're right about these globalists. They believe that they have a greater knowledge, they are wiser, they are more enlightened, they are more intelligent. And the world would be better off if everyone just listened to them and followed their instructions. And you find these people, we see this with Albanese, with his industry policy. He believes he knows better than the market does and wants to direct control about it. It's the socialist, communist tendencies that want to control people and control people's lifestyles. You look at this government, what they're doing. They want to control the car that we drive. They want to control the type of house we live in. They want to limit the food we eat, how our electricity is generated, where we can travel, how we can travel. They want to control all aspects of our life. Now, I believe it should be the complete opposite. It should be the citizens that decide for themselves about those things. And it should be the citizens
And Craig, if I can just back you up, it's not you saying this. The globalists themselves have said exactly what you just said they're saying. The globalists have said it from Maurice Strong right the way through.
That's right.
But let's attack and sorry, keep going.
They think they are more enlightened than the average citizen, and they want to control the average citizen's life because they think you will be more better off if you listen to me rather than yourself. That's how these people think.
Yep, and the reality is that humans care, but as Thomas Jefferson pointed out, some people want to take over a government and they always want to control. They want to get things for free. They want to use your labour rather than their own labour. And so we've always had this problem. It's called the human condition, the ego. Be wary of the control freaks. But let's go to the second lie that these globalists are telling. Human civilization and the environment, the natural environment, are mutually exclusive. They're not. They're mutually dependent. If you're a poor person, poor parent in some undeveloped country in Africa or Asia, your main focus, your only focus is how do I get my kid his next meal?
Correct.
That's your only focus. And you don't care if you crap in the creek because that's, quite frankly, what you're going to have to do to maximize the time scrounging around for food. When you have a developed society, you have steel, concrete, you have water accessible at any time, you have flushing toilets, you have sanitation, and you have less impact on the environment. Less impact on the environment. So human development and natural environment are mutually dependent, are mutually dependent. You can't have, the future of civilization depends upon having a healthy environment. The health of our civilization depends upon having a healthy environment. So the two are interlinked closely. I mean, you're breathing in carbon dioxide now that came from trees. You're breathing out carbon dioxide that goes to trees. Trees are our lungs, Craig.
That's right. Look, I've been fortunate before I got into Parliament to do quite a bit of travel around the world. And the one thing that I noticed, the poorer the country was, the worse their environmental standards were and their environmental conditions in the natural environment. And vice versa. You have to have a strong, prosperous economy to be able to look after your environment. And every time we do something that weakens the economy, ultimately we are weakening the environment. And you see also this nonsense of these mad plans we see there in Queensland. Bulldozing thousands of acres of natural native forest to build wind turbines, like destroying the local environment to protect it. We see these plans here off the New South Wales coast of these offshore wind turbines. But this is madness. You've got these magnificent vistas off places like Nelson's Bay and Wollongong that they're planning these floating, they're actually going to be floating wind turbines because the ocean is so deep, tied to the seabed with giant steel cables, which would be like a giant obstacle course for whales and sea life to get through.
What's this cost to build? What's this cost to connect? And what's the security of it? What's the damage to the environment? You know, Alex Epstein, the philosopher from California, he said that
The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels is his book.
Yes, wonderful book.
If people haven't read it, they should read it. It's called The Moral Case for Fossil Fuels.
Yeah. He points out that for a unit of energy to come from a coal-fired power station, you need 35 tonnes of steel per kilowatt hour. For the same amount of electricity to come from a wind turbine, you need 546 tonnes of steel. The wind turbines and solar panels are just huge resource hogs. But my point is, Craig, we just finish up on this and go to Q&A. My point is that the globalists are pushing the lie that humans don't care. They're pushing the lie that we need to protect the environment as our main goal. What I think we need to do is to wake people up and say that the main goal of every human should be for humans to flourish. When humans flourish, the environment takes care of itself. And the environment is important and civilization is important. They both are mutually dependent. So we need to start focusing on human flourishing again, which is what's happened with cheap electricity up until 1996.
No, exactly right. The low-cost energy is the fundamental building block of a prosperous and successful society. We have declared war on low-cost electricity with this delusion, absolute delusion, that you can run an economy on solar panels, wind turbines, and big batteries. There is no country in the world that does that or is actually trying to do that. And yet we have Chris Blackout Bowen, a man that has failed in every single portfolio that he's been given by the Labor Party, now in charge of this. And Malcolm, it is heading for a disaster. Now, we used to have the lowest electricity costs in the world. That was one of our nation's great natural competitive advantage. It underwrote our wealth and prosperity. We have surrendered that to this mad, mad delusion.
Yep. Viv Rowe, I've just seen in the comments flashing by, there's so many comments coming in. Viv Rowe says, just say it. There is no climate change. There is no climate change. I've said that many times. How many years have you been saying it, Craig?
Well, I'll say it is a complete and utter scam. If you look at the data, yes, the climate changes are cyclical. We had the hottest periods of this country. We had a hot period back in 1930s and 1940s. Then we went through a period of cooling. So from the 1940s to the late mid-1970s, we had a period of cooling when CO2 went up. And yes, there may have been some mild warming since the late 1970s, and for good. We are better off with a warmer climate. You look at the data, and in those times, crop yields continue to increase. Everything that you can measure, even everything the alarmist campaign going about. The Pacific Islands are supposedly sinking. No, they're not. They're growing. The polar bears are supposedly all dying out. No, the number of polar bears are increasing in size.
Fivefold.
Yeah, we're supposed to have all this deforestation. No, we are getting global greening. There is more greenery on the planet today than when I was in high school. Everything that you can measure shows.
Let's get on to questions, but I just want to ask you a question, Craig. What's the best friend of the whale?
Well, it's certainly not the Labor government. I'll tell you that for sure.
No, the best friend of the whales before coal and coal-fired power.
Yes.
Before that, we used whale oil at night for lighting. When we stopped, when we started using coal-fired power, we stopped killing whales. What's the best friend of the forest, mate? Because before we started using coal-fired power stations, we used to chop down trees. The area of land covered in the developed continents, covered by forests, has increased 30% in the last 100 years since the use of electricity instead of burning timber. So let's move on. So let's just finish that point. I think we need to change the focus from protecting the environment, which when it's a sole focus, that destroys the environment, to human flourishing. That needs to be our goal, human flourishing, and then we get the environment flourishing. Anybody got any questions for Craig or for me or for both? Richard Love, can you see them, Craig?
Yeah, I can see that, yes, yeah. Look, I don't blame him. I'd imagine the cost of running a farm today in these regional areas is just, and the red and green tape they are done. Our farmers are our most productive Australians.
Yep.
And we are bashing them every single day. There is a wealth transfer going on from the country to the city. And I'm sorry to say this, the National Party have abandoned regional Australia.
Yep.
How the National Party could allow net zero policies in agriculture without putting up a case that agriculture should be exempt, knowing that it will lead in more a flow of wealth from the country to the city area is just, it defies belief. And I hope many people in the National Party wake up and do something to try and either regain that organisation or give them a great shock that they just, at the next election, they just can't go on continuing to vote generation after generation, hoping that the National Party is going to look after them. Because at the moment, the National Party has abandoned the bush.
Yep. And you mentioned, Richard Love has just mentioned on the comment, green and red tape. There's also blue tape. That's the blue tape that the UN is pushing. A lot of things are done just for the United Nations for no sound reason. You want to understand why housing costs are so high? Part of it is green, red, and blue tape. It's that simple, and it's devastating in farming. Aaron James says he counted 71 tents in one park in South Brisbane last week. Wow, that's the most I've seen. But I met with a mayor yesterday, Craig, a former mayor, sorry. He explained the circumstance. It's not a simple fix. It would be if the federal government got its act together and stopped bringing in so many migrants. But it requires, it's a complete mess with the council financing and structures and the systems that the state governments put over the councils. They're really destroying the ability of people to build houses.
Look, 71, Did you ever think you'd see that in our country? People forced
71 across Australia? No, you wouldn't
That's
think there'd be
just in
71
one little
people
part
living
of
in
South
tents.
Brisbane. That number of people living in tents. I never thought that is something I would see in my country, but that is what we are seeing under the policies of this government. The Liberals are just as much to blame for it.
Well, Howard ramped up immigration.
You cannot ramp up your immigration above your nation's capacity to build houses. Simple. And I saw one of the Greens interviewed the other day, and he's in complete denial. He says, "Oh, let's have rent caps," and say, "Oh no, we should keep. Don't worry about these people. They are too frightened to say what the root cause of the problem is. There's higher levels of migration. It's become like at the stage it was politically incorrect that you couldn't mention the rates of migration. You just had to let the government control it, and it is out of control. We must, if we're going to get over this, if we're going to try and get some affordability back in our housing and rentals, we must cut the rate of migration until we can catch up with the housing supply. And you can't and you can't force feed the housing supply down the track, right? Because all that does is put inflationary costs, as we've seen in the housing in the supply chains.
Do you want to read what Dave said there, Greg?
Yeah, 2,300 building companies have gone under Australia-wide, plus some. No housing getting built in the short or long term. Time to stop all migration until infrastructure is fit. Correct. I looked at some data today, Malcolm, which I'm going to put up on my social media page. We have the number of housing starts under construction is about the same as it was 40 years ago. That's homes. Standalone homes. We are building no more than what we were 40 years ago. And you've got
we've got record immigration. Record
immigration. And you've got, for building approvals, the number is the same as it was back, I think, in the 1990s. So you've got construction collapsing. You've got approvals collapsing. The only thing that must be done, any responsible government should cut migration. But Albanese doesn't want to do that because it risks showing the truth about what's happening in the economy, and that is GDP per capita, that we are going backwards because of his net zero madness.
Right. And I'm going to read you a text message I got yesterday when I met with that former mayor who explained the way the state government is abusing councils and the neglect that's making it very difficult for councils to develop properly for housing. I invited someone who's been working very hard on volunteer capacity for looking after all the people that he's seen spring up in Logan and living in tents in Logan and Ipswich. His name's Daniel Cinjano, and I interviewed him in the podcast a few months ago. This is the text he sent. New donated camper trailer family, 5 kids. 5 kids, Craig. House sold out from under them, so they must have been renting. Applied for over 180 houses. Nothing. He messaged me this morning. I just put them into a camper trailer with a fridge and solar panel. Fighting back the emotions, mate. Shouldn't be happening. Doing what we can.
I bet. And yet, all the other one is we're still allowing foreigners to come into the country to buy property. That is, Malcolm, that has to stop. I know you've been very vocal on that. At this stage of any time in our economy, you can't have overseas people coming in, speculating on Australian property, buying it up, and often leaving it vacant when we've got Australians, as you said, like that family, forced to live in caravans and tents. Our policies are completely back to front. We've just got to be brave enough. Because it's been for years. You mentioned we need to change the rate of migration. It's you racist bastard, they call you. Point the finger at them. How dare you even raise that issue? That's what we're up against. That's the mentality that affects the Greens and the Teals and many people in Labor and Liberal parties, that we can't even discuss these issues. We need to be able to discuss these issues in the best interest of the Australian people. And at the moment, the best interest of the Australian people is to cut, as you said, to have net zero migration. Right? Well, then get back to that number. As I said, for many years when I was growing up in this country, 80,000 was the number of new migrants that we had to this country. And that built the wonderful, prosperous nation that we had. 80,000 should be the number we should aim at long term. And yet 200,000 plus under the Liberals and now 500,000 under Labor. Now, no wonder we are seeing this happening to so many Australians in this country.
Need to fix energy policies so we can get housing and construction costs down. We also need a people's bank to provide genuine competition for the majors. I've pointed out several times in the Senate now, outside the Senate, Craig, there's about 10% of each of the major four banks is owned by a combination of BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, First State. So that's 10% doesn't sound like it, but it is a controlling interest because you've got mums and dads, you've got superannuation funds that don't take an active stake in voting. So the major funds around the world, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, First State, they control our big four banks. And our big four banks have 90% of the cash, 90% of the cash deposits. And so what we've got, Craig, in this country is we've got one bank with four logos. They have the same policies, the same strategies, the same services, the same products, and they're all. And then we have a setup in this country whereby the banks are protected by legislation. People think we need legislation to protect us from the banks. That may be true, but the legislation at the moment protects the banks. You just try and sue one of the bastards, it'll eat you up. So what we've got to do is come back with the People's Bank, just like the original Commonwealth Bank, not the current Commonwealth Bank. The original Commonwealth Bank was a wonderful People's Bank that got our country moving and gave loans to businesses and small businesses. We've got the only bank in North America, major bank in North America, that has made a profit every year of its existence is the State Bank of North Dakota. It's a People's Bank. It's run by the government, and it gives loans to mums and dads, and also to small businesses and farms. And that's what we need. We need genuine competition, because when the original Commonwealth Bank was around, they provided competition which held the major banks accountable. And guess who got rid of them? Liberal Labor, over many generations got rid of them working together. Why? Because the private banks wanted them gone.
Mm-hmm. I just see there's a comment on the screen. Craig, join One Nation. Come on, mate. We need you. I've already got my membership cards. Don't worry. I'm already a signed up member. So we're already there.
Yeah, I've got to get ready for a radio interview. So,
okay.
Anything else you want to say, Craig? Because we're going to have to wrap it up in 5 minutes.
Yeah, no, it's great to be on board with One Nation. We have to get the message through to Australians that the political choice that they have is Labor Liberal versus One Nation. We are the true opposition in this country. Right? The Labor and Liberal parties are their policies are so similar, on the same page. Both of them have signed up to net zero. Both of them want high rates of migration. Both of them are for digital identity. It is One Nation that is providing the opposition in this country. And you and Pauline are doing a fantastic job there in the Senate. Just think there's just the two of you, and also Senator Babbitt's also, I know, helping along there as well. But just to have the two or three of you battling against the entire Parliament, credit off to you, more strength to you. And I hope that me being on One Nation and being on as National Director, I can give you as much support as we can running to this next election. And Australia's got to think. If they want a continuation of the way that things are going, continue the way to vote as you did before. Labor or Liberal, swap the banner. If not, there's a real third alternative, and that is a vote for One Nation.
Thank you very much, Craig, for joining our party. I've been looking forward to you coming on board, because you and I have worked together for many years. This man makes statements based on fact. This man tells the truth. This man speaks based on data. And that is so refreshing. To fix this country, we need to make decisions, policies, and legislation based on data. Get back to fact-based governance. That's what we need. And we need citizens who take an active interest in the governance of this country, and who realise that Liberal Labor are the same thing. They're the same thing. The policies are the same. So we need people to think and to realise that they have to vote for an alternative. If you want the same to continue, vote Liberal. If you want the same to continue, vote Labor. If you want different and you want to get back to the way our country was, when we were number one in per capita income in the world, vote One Nation.